Good afternoon, everyone. This is Naishad Gadani coming to you from Melbourne. And today is 164th episode of Career Care Package. And on today's episode, we are talking about job search in Australia and also answering your trickiest and toughest job search question that you have. So you can ask us anything about job search. Please don't ask us anything about who the heck is going to win US election because nobody knows that. So we will not be answering that question, but we will be answering every other question about careers and jobs and interviews, LinkedIn, social media, to find work, to everything under the sun. So please start to drop in your questions and we will tackle that one by one. And as usual, if you know somebody who would benefit from this discussion, please tag them onto the LinkedIn live chat. Is it would do a world of favor to them. So let's welcome Caroline Brown, the co-host of the show.
Thanks, Naish. And I put in the comments about this show that, yes, we'll tackle any questions, but except for two. One is the US election and who the hell's going to win. And the second is, why doesn't my cat eat the food that I give him after pestering me for hours? They're two equally puzzling questions in my book. So if anybody's got any answers on the second one, which is more pressing for me anyway, please pop them in the comments, basically. So fantastic to be here. Another day of another donut day in Victoria, I believe. We're doing well.
It is 7 days in a row
Yeah.
that we are doing absolutely fantastic. Obviously,
Yeah.
we are looking at more, restrictions easing over the weekend, starting from
Mm.
next week. But it was interesting to listen to the RBA's board of RBA's the meeting, and one of the thing was that they've started to see some signs of economic recovery, and they are
Mm.
anticipating that the unemployment rate for Australia, what they anticipate around 8%, will
Mm.
not reach 8%,
Yeah.
as well. So I think that's a fantastic story coming out of, obviously, apart from the reduction in the interest rate. I think this is another fantastic story coming out, and you could sense that kind of thing, that that amount of optimism when you
Mm.
when you go to the shopping centers and when you go and talk to people. I think there is a renewed sense of optimism.
Mm.
And obviously, leading up to Christmas, we will also see a huge spending in terms of retail, hospitality, to
Mm.
tourism, because I think
Mm.
regional Victoria will be absolutely flooded with tourists, because we can now go there. And obviously, New South Wales borders are going to open on 23rd of November, which means
Mm.
that we can also venture into Sydney as well. So it's going to be,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, right? I
I
was
know
hoping
everyone be
to,
happy about that, but feels like we've just been let out. It sort of feels like we've been, let out of the bag, but still like, what just happened in a way? Like, it feels very weird. And Balin, hi Balin, it's good to see you here. Says it's a double donut for 7 days in a row, which yeah, is fantastic. So I think I might go out and buy some donuts and eat them in celebration. But it does feel weird. It feels like we've been locked up and so used to being locked up and institutionalized that suddenly we have freedom and we're like, what? What does that mean? So I haven't been among the crowds that came out or any place like that. So, but I have been out for a paddle, which has been lovely. So, yeah. So if you've got job search questions to stop me rambling on, please put them in the comments. We're more than happy to answer them, and we'll go from there.
absolutely. I think if you just want to start, as people join in and ask questions, I think if you just want to reflect on this week's LinkedIn Live as well, I think we
Mm,
had a quite diverse range of guests, starting with Brandon, who gave a lot of practical advice around public speaking,
mm,
tips. I really like the one that I think we also briefly spoke about, is the random word thing, that
mm,
you start to pick up a word and think about, telling a story or telling about that word 1 minute every day. You can
mm,
pick up any word, during during a day. I think that really kind of expands your thinking, and then you're suddenly kind of put onto this under pressure. I remember I in my university days we used to do an impromptu speech where
Mm.
you have to talk about a topic and you get up there and that's where you get the topic, and then you have I think 30 seconds to think about it, but then you got to talk for a couple of minutes. I think those are things that really, it's not a competition, but it just really challenges your thinking. You really have to, lucky you if you get a kind of a topic which you already know. But then
Mm.
you, if you get into a topic such as, why uranium mining is not allowed in Australia or something, and they say, oh God, where do I start with that, right?
Mm.
So I think there is there's that amount of kind of expansion of your knowledge and expansion of your the way you approach things. It was absolutely fascinating. And
Mm.
then we also spoke to Jenny, and she was great. She talked about very simple and effective things, and how she observed a lot of different cultures across where she
Mm.
traveled and where she lived and worked. That was also pretty fascinating to to have a look at that. And yesterday, storytelling was such a fabulous and insightful, session that we had with Sandy McDonald around the
It was so
storytelling.
yeah, it was really interesting because of the power of stories and how they hook you in. And relating to that, the interview technique of the star approach of saying, when I was working at IBM in 2017, and suddenly there's a curiosity that's inspired in that. But a more sort of what I really found interesting about her was, in terms of the stuff that everyone puts out on social media, that people say the how-tos and the list posts are really compelling. And all of the stats that you read around LinkedIn show that the how-to in particular, are very popular posts. But the thing is that one of the reasons I think they're popular is that everyone writes them. So, but she was talking about basically picking one point and telling the story around that with the curious beginning, and the way that the context and the action part, and then how it all turned out is a much more um, interesting and engaging way of actually telling, but also selling that story as well. So, yeah. And just one other thing I wanted to say, just picking up on what you were saying about Brendan on Monday about public speaking, one of the things that he said, which I thought was a really interesting concept, is the concept of hacking. So, if you're worried about an interview or you're worried about a speech that you do, give it in front of your worst audience, and then the interview panel or the presentation people, they don't seem as bad. So I must try that, or just imagine my worst audience of critics and see what happens. But yeah,
Yeah,
thank
if I have to
you.
pitch, yeah,
Sorry.
my thumb rule is if I have to pitch anything, I pitch it to my wife first, and if she says it's great, then I'll just sort of go along with it. But another thing is, I also like the idea of I don't know. I've previously shared about the hero's journey as well, which
Mm,
is also a story arc where you see most of the. I think there's a book called Hero's Journey, and somebody actually looked at the mythological heroes and also some of the ones that we see Avengers and all those things, and where you can
mm,
see that the world was fine. Hero's got a superpower, and then hero is faced with a challenge, and he or she uses the superpower. They overcome the challenge, and then they found that there's a bigger challenge, and that's when
mm,
they start to question their whole identity and everything,
mm,
and they take a deep dive, and then they have
mm,
to go deeper into their life to really find some more meaning, and then they come out of that with more conviction, and they beat the bad thing, or the wrong thing, and then they are back into their life. So I think if you look at the behavioral
mm,
questions or the story that you tell in the interviews is similar to that. I think that
mm,
if you tell with that perspective that you are the hero of that particular incident and you were faced with a
mm,
challenge, and this is how you conquered the challenge, and this is what you learned about yourself as part of conquering the challenge, and now you're back at
Mm,
that again. I think even that perspective around telling a story is also very easy to explain, but
mm,
also at the same time it's also juicier too.
mm,
It's also, as you rightly pointed out, yes, is that whether the other person lean in or not.
mm,
And I think that is where you got to really think about, as
mm.
well. So, right, so Balin saying that Toastmasters is a good idea if somebody wants to improve public speaking skill. Absolutely, I am. Thanks, Balin, for bringing that, because I think they are doing exceptionally great job around improving a public speaking, but also general communication skill as well.
And
And
also
Amit,
building network as
yeah,
well, you know. Yeah, sorry, go on.
no, no, Amit's question is, I'm planning to land in first week of February. Is it okay, or does it make sense to come early? Look, I think first week of February sounds really great, and by that time, obviously, we will see the whole, we don't know honestly which states will be open for international travel and things like that, but obviously, as you may have heard, the Victoria is now accepting passengers from New Zealand.
Mm.
So I think that's a really great step in that. And February, I think we'll start to see that there's some form of normality will also come in the economic activity. So I think that's a fairly good idea, Amit.
Mm.
But please make sure that you tell me, because I want to get something from India too. So yeah, I'll say.
This sounds sinister, Nishat. What special parcel are you asking Amit to bring?
Well, it's kind of, you can consider it's kind of a what do you say, a gift for the knowledge that we've been imparting, Amit,
Oh,
for a
that's
long time.
priceless.
Yeah, that's
I
absolutely
don't think you'll
priceless.
have a
So
big enough bag for that. You heard that, Amit? So, Amit said, oh, Poonam says, hi, Poonam, great to see you here. Amit says he's released his small ebook on Amazon Kindle, Welcome to the World of Storytelling, which gives a quick idea about storytelling methods and other aspects of storytelling. Maybe you should get Amit on to talk about his ebook as well. If you'd like to join us, that would be great. And a question from Gayan, how long back, this is about an interview, how long back can we go to give our examples from a career? Is it a 5-year limit, or can we give an example that is older than that? That's a really good question. We get that a little bit about interviews. Um, I guess it depends. I mean, when people do behavioral interviews, the premise is that your past behavior reflects, or is a good demonstration of your future behavior. So, and I guess the more recent demonstration of your skills. So you've got to keep that in mind. 5 years, I don't know where that comes from. So I would aim to go for more recent examples if you can, because then I guess people will be asking, what's your questions around your motivation to apply for this job. So you'd be better to be prepared with those as well. Um, but before that, if you've got a great example that really illustrates a point with some lessons learnt that you still apply in your career today, then and it's a great example for that particular question. I'd certainly give that as well. So, but I would give some context around it and say, this happened back in 2015, but the lessons I learnt are very relevant today because. So you're making sure that you provide that context or that reason that people aren't going to wonder why you're giving that example particularly.
I think I agree with it. I think context is very important in here, because if you can elaborate on that, I think I've got an answer which I worked 7-8 years back, which is more appropriate. I think people are okay with it, but you got to tell them that why you're picking up it. If I can share my own story around the recent interview that I attended, there's a question which I felt that one of my volunteering experience that I do every year is more relevant to managing a large and different team, where we don't have a kind of a formal structure in volunteering, but still I have to manage that particular team. And I explained it to them that this is the most appropriate example that I could find it from it them, and if they are happy with it, I can talk about it. And they were happy with it. That I explained it to them, which also brought the aspect of richness in the whole discussion as well. Which also brought the aspect that I'm not just not working, but I'm also doing some volunteering activities that contributes to building a different kind of skill set in my for my work and my life. So I think it is possible for you to do that. There's no actually limit. They don't say that there's a limit that how far can you go back. But at the same time, if you have worked on a specific project that was 10 years back, and the questions are related to that, I think you can very well explain that, but be make sure that you create the context of it,
Mm.
as well, so that makes it easier for people to relate to.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, so we've got a question from Gayan. Hopefully that answers your question. If you still think that we have missed out on any aspect of the question, please elaborate on that, and we will come back to that straight away. Some tips on salary negotiation. Imtiaz is asking, when you get a call from a recruiter, they ask you what are your salary expectations, what was your previous salary, how do you negotiate this effectively without being a deal breaker. I think, look, the best way to do that is to divert the call to Donald Trump, because he says that he's a great negotiator.
We weren't going to talk about the elections.
Yeah. So just send a tweet to dear Donald, please can you help me with it? But I think in order for you to negotiate anything, you got to know that the realistic
Were.
expectation there, right?
Mm.
What are you've got to reasonably know that what is the worth of your job. What you know i- let's say, for example, for a graduate to ask that I'm looking for $100,000 job, unless the graduate is has won maths olympiads and god knows how much, then it makes sense. But if you look at the general kind of skill set, then you got to reasonably know where do you fit in, what kind of kind of range that you fit in. And I think having a range, my understanding is that if you want to settle at $60,000, for example, then you tell people that that you want to work within 60 to $65,000. Which don't give them more than $5,000 range to negotiate with, because $10,000 is just too big and $2,000 is just too narrow. I think have a $5,000 kind of a range to talk to them about. But at the same time, deep down, you got to know that you are happy to even settle for 58,000 also, right? I think you got to know where you stand in terms of the negotiation before you start to talk to them. These are some of my.
I think well, the range, say the $5,000 means a lot more at 60,000, 55 to 60,000 than it does from, if you're in that bracket. But if you're in a more of an executive role, $5,000 is nothing. So you've got to understand, I guess, the range of what is market value, what is the market paying for that particular role, and also what you want, right? So there's two things. If you say I want between $65,000 and $70,000, guess what you're going to get is $65,000. So your low point, I would tend to have name a rate, knowing that is what is from your research, what is the standard rate, what you could expect for that particular role, but also and have that as your base point, but go higher slightly or higher and ask for that point, because then you're not cutting off, you're not leaving money on the table, basically. The thing about money is that it's not your worth so much. It's what the company is prepared to pay, what the market is prepared to pay, and the value that is attributed to that. It's so you got to kind of, when not so much look at what you were paid previously. It's for that role and what your expectations are for that role, what the market is actually prepared to pay. Um, so when they say what were you paid previously, you might be paid a whole lot less. And often I think there's research out there that shows that people within companies that get progressed are paid quite significantly less than what the company would have to pay if they go outside that. So when they ask you what your previous salary was, feel by all means state that, but be very clear that that's not what your expectations are for your next role, because then you're reducing your value in the eyes of the employer. So I would state more than what you personally think that you're worth. Really understand the value that the market is prepared to pay, because I think most of us, and I think maybe more so women, they tie the salary to how they personally see their value versus what the market or the value that the organization sees in that role as well.
Yep. Gayan is hopefully that answers your
Mm.
question, Imtiaz. Please feel free to send your comments in. Gayan is saying that yes, I've been asked to give local experience example instead of overseas example. That's a tricky one because if your resume states that you haven't worked here, I don't know whether you can pluck an example from the thin air to tell people something which is more related. But
Mm.
at the same time, if you've got any form of experience that you've done here, it could be a customer service role, or it could be an odd job, or it could be a volunteering role. I think it is then in from that perspective, talking about your experience in Australia and sharing your incident from their experience makes a lot of sense. But if your resume clearly states that you haven't worked here, and you're bound to give example which are overseas example, and I don't think so that people would take any negatively that particular aspect. I think that's absolutely fine. You got to just explain it to people.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one, because I guess what they're trying to understand is also, or it comes from ignorance, that from their point of view, right? So from their point of view, the stuff that you've done overseas is different somehow to what you've done here, and we all know that that's not the case. There's so many similarities, and we're in a global economy. So I would basically be saying along the lines of, giving your example and then saying, based on my research of similar roles in Australia, I've been talking to a lot of people, looking at job descriptions and company profiles. I think that's a very similar example, a very similar approach as to what I would take in Australia. I think these things are universal, and then point out what they are. What are the universal things? We've got the same sort of stakeholder engagement. I'm just thinking randomly, but the same. We work with the same sort of stakeholders. We're using the same sort of technology. Our project management methodology is agile, which I know gets used here. So this example would be very relevant to an Australian example because of those reasons. And just again, give them the context. Don't let them guess, but also make sure that you do know. That's it's just a question that they're assuming that there's a difference, but you've got to point out what the similarities are, based on what your understanding is. So, but then they might be questioning again, if you're giving a role, that an example that's 5 years back, why are you actually applying for this job? So, you've got to be prepared to answer that. Um, Poonam says, how to apply for government jobs which are not related to our profile, such as admin or clerical jobs.
I think and I think given the pandemic situation, I think a lot of governments are also putting huge amount of money in different projects as well, which is creating a lot of opportunities. We have seen that in at least in Victoria. Given that a lot of people are also transitioning from their role to some other roles right now, I think any employer would see that as a favorable point of view. I don't think so that it will be seen as negative that why you worked in IT and why you're suddenly trying to move into more administrative or business oriented roles. I think that is absolutely fine for for people to do. So make sure that you extract the transferable skills or examples from your those roles, IT's focused role, and translate that into more or align that to what the selection criteria is asking for. I think that is particularly very important to know. I give you an example of one of my clients. She got a job with New South Wales government, and she's got a 8 9 years of employment gap, and she effectively this is her first job in Australia. Now she comes from a IT project management background, and the role that she got is purely into project management, project coordination, which is not at all related to IT, which is more generic project management in one of the New South Wales government department. And that's what we did, was that to extract stories out of her work and started to write those examples which relates to the selection criteria. And the resume also changed, because resume we focused more on generic project coordination and management and planning skills, rather than take talking about the IT related stuff that she did. Obviously she worked in IBM, so when somebody looks at that, it's easy for them to relate to that. Oh, you worked in IBM, it's an IT company. But not necessarily every IT company, and you get the role which is purely technical. It's a project coordination role, and that's what we started to extract, and that worked for her completely, because we focused on the stories that relates to what they were asking for, and that's what we
Yeah.
focused on. Okay,
I
that's
think,
that be my suggestion.
yeah, Punam, we've got a thing on YouTube when we interviewed Carolyn Smith on government selection criteria, and she made some fantastic points around that and what positions you're likely to be able to target if you want to transition from the private sector into the public sector. But one of the points that she made, which is just I'm just sort of reinforcing what Naisha said, is that your examples need to be relevant, right? So if you've got relevant examples of your administrative skills, um, that are very similar to the types of functions that you're going to be performing, then that's the example. It's not your sort of more high level, say, for example, IT examples. So it might be, where I don't know what the criteria would be. So where say, for example, they're asking you how you've communicated with stakeholders. So you've got to pick out stakeholders that you've communicated and engaged with effectively that are very similar for a similar purpose that you're doing, going to be doing in this role. And one of the ways that I do that is I introduce the example. So I say, I understand that, in the admin role that I'm going to be communicating with team members doing blah, blah, blah. Here's an example of where I've done that using the STAR example. So when people talk about transferable skills, it's not all of the other more generic skills. It's really you showing that you've got the right example for that particular job. So just keep that in mind as well. So yes, Imtiaz says, thank you both. KB, your last point was gold. Excellent. Gold star to me, Nish.
Yeah, Imtiaz, I'll see to it that you repeat the same comment for me as well. And KB takes the gratitude in cash, not
I
kind,
do.
just to let you know.
Actually, what I'm taking it in is donuts in celebration of donut days. So yes, and probably donut thighs after donut days. So all right.
All right, we got a question from Priya Rajan Das. November to January is considered a lean period for the jobs. Do you feel this year also will be any different? It might be a little bit different. I would think so. Just to give an example, if you're a lot of the time building and construction, specifically come to a grinding halt, which also makes sense, because then there is a kind of a domino effect on a lot of other industry. Manufacturing also goes down. They also shut down their time for the Christmas time. But I think this time it might be different. I think the economic activity will continue to grow. But remember this is that it will not be exactly how the last year January looked like. So if you want to compare that, I think you'd probably be in a, that may not be accurate. But I think the economic activity will slow down, but it will not be slowed down at the same rate or percentages that how it slowed down in 2019. That's just my view, because I think a lot of small business would like to keep their business running rather than stopping there right now, because it is not helpful to them. If you work throughout that time, you need the time off, which makes sense. But I think a lot of the people will still move, from one place to the other due to holidays, tourism, and everything. So I think we still might see good amount of the activity because of the pandemic. I don't think so it will come to a straight grinding halt, but that's my
Maybe there's less
perception.
of a line. We used to joke that Australia closed down between Melbourne Cup Day and Australia Day, but really our work and home lives have been so blurred, with people working from home, that I guess the economic activity has been blurred as well. And we also don't really know, you know, what's going to happen around the corner in terms of the pandemic as well. So, and also, there have been a lot of businesses that have closed. There's still restrictions in Victoria in particular, like down at the Mornington Peninsula, they're not having the usual camping influx because they're keeping the parks closed. So there's a whole lot of stuff that's still going on, which means people will stay at home, they're ordering stuff online. So you might just sort of see a bit of a continuation until things become clearer. So, and the market does slow down in a typical year, but I'd still be applying for jobs if you're looking for jobs, because a lot of people will assume that it's quiet. So I'd certainly be doing that with a good break in between, though. I think everyone's got to have a bit of a holiday this year as well, no matter where they take it. So okay, so I've got a question from Sajani. I got the suggestion not to apply to very different ranges of jobs, but because I have a background from pharmacy overseas and biotechnology management in Australia, I'm confused about what my job search should be like. You can get a lot of advice, but um, and it can be really confusing when you. Here's where I reckon a lot of the confusion comes from, right? People ask their friends, their family, their partners, um, other people outside their field about what they should be doing with their set of skills. But there's two places they don't tend to go to. One is inside and go, what is it that I actually really want to do? And the second place is um, who do I know, or who's actually doing what I think I might be able to do. So they're the two things that you should use as your compass. And you know, if you typically apply for jobs online, you never get feedback, right? So the reason that you're being rejected may not be the reason that you think. So my advice would be, which of those things interest you the most? Like if there's a reason that you can't practice pharmacy here, that might be out, you can't do that. But just say there is, which of those things interest you the most? Who's actually working in that kind of role? And get out there and ask them what's involved in that role, how they crack that role, what they find interesting about their role, what advice they could give to you. And also, if you're from overseas, try and find people that have gone that path, the same path as you, because you can guarantee that there will be a few of them lurking around on LinkedIn that could actually help you understand what they did to crack their first role. So my advice on that is, don't take advice from people that are not positioned to give you that advice. Make sure you know what you want to do, but make sure you're talking to people that are actually in those roles that can tell you whether you're skilled, qualified, and would enjoy those roles as well.
I think the third group, I agree with KB, the two groups, but I think the third group of people you should talk to me is like me and KB. or some other career coaches out there, because me and KB have worked with very diverse range of professionals also, so we can cut through the clutter and really help you to really focus inward and answer those questions. And that's what the role of a counselor or the coach is, to really facilitate those discussions as well. So I think going you would not ask, if you have got a fever, you would not ask your mom and dad, except if they are general practitioners. But you'd go and ask somebody who's a general practitioner, say, hang on, I've been having this tummy ache for last 1 week, tell me what to do with it, right? Similarly, when it comes to career, if you are confused about certain aspects of the career, it's better that you go out and seek help from a professional who can answer, who can probably facilitate the discussion, and you'll have what you're looking for in 2 days time, rather
Mm.
than doing the same mistake over and over again. But going to the point what KB made is that find out people in your network who have taken similar path before, and have a genuine conversation with them. Because what it also allows you to do is to have a clear check on your skills, whether you have what the employers are looking for or not. And if you don't have, what are the ways that you can really breach that gap as well, Sajari? So I think these are some of the things that we could say. Obviously, you'll probably end up having millions of other questions, but feel free to reach out to me or KB, because it's not as simple, as it sounds. We are more than happy to give you a complimentary session where we could discuss few things, and then tell you that what exactly it will constitute if you want to seek our services. But feel free. I think that's what I would encourage. All right. I think Poonam is saying, KB. Sorry, Imtiaz said that I knew it. Nishad will pick me on it. Absolutely. Imtiaz, I never miss that. And Puram is saying, thanks, KB and NG. I'm really fed up with IT recruiters. Yeah, you're not the one. Thinking of switching to basic jobs where I have to contact employers directly, such as government sector. And I think that's right. Look, each of the pathway, they're not an easy pathway. But I think if you have tried one pathway, it's not really working out, then it is absolutely fine for you to try the other one around. But remember, it's just not about that pathway, but whether you are approaching that, diligently, whether you are approaching the same thing with thoughtfulness and real dedication or not. That also will determine the success even in the other pathway as well. But that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, okay, there's a few things. With recruiters, they're not miracle workers. So, and they're not generally not career coaches. So, what they do is at the very basic level, they fill a brief for an employer. So they're expert in that employer's job, hopefully, and similar sort of jobs that they might be recruiting for. Um, so in terms of being fed up with IT recruiters, um, it doesn't. I'm not sure that I would just use not getting traction with them as a reason to not pursue what you're skilled and qualified and capable of in IT, but I would use that as a reflection point on, is there something that I'm doing that isn't, is there something in my approach that isn't working with recruiters? Am I applying for the right jobs? Am I applying for, is it in how I'm communicating? Is there something missing in my resume? Am I being asked the same question and getting the same feedback? Like, just, be a bit forensic about what it is that you might be missing the mark on as well with that, and don't necessarily use that lack of traction as I've got to change to something different. It might be something in your approach to that job more so than that you're not suitable, like you're getting rejected from a small segment of people who control and not a huge segment of the employment market to make a decision about what you should be doing next. So, and then, if you're applying for a job in government that has its same challenges or different challenges, you've got to write a decent selection criteria. You've got to make sure, you've got to talk to somebody about the job, make sure that you understand what you're applying for, know why you want to do that job, because you'll still be asked that in a different way. Yeah, so just be a little careful on that one. I don't think it's a great idea to base your future on rejection from the past. I think you've got to go what it is that I'm really interested in doing and qualified to do and have skills in doing and that kind of thing, versus I'm just not getting through this little roadblock over in this direction on a road that I'm traveling.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Poonam. Give it a go, see what happens, and keep us updated on how that thing is traveling for you. Imtiaz is now asking us a question, putting us on the spot. What's the best advice both have ever received when it comes to career and professional development? Um, I think one of the advice, there obviously a lot of advice, a lot of gold, I think nudges that I've received from people. But if I can reflect on that, one of the thing that my mentor said, that I need to trust my abilities more than what I'm trusting it. I do have a tendency to not trust it fully, and I do go into self doubt, quite a frequent amount of time, probably 23 hours out of 24 hours. And I think that is what I've been, very conscious of and continuously working on, is trusting my abilities, trusting my skills is something that I've received. In terms of professional development, I think I consider myself that I'm quite aware of the gaps that exist with where am I and where I want to be. Not necessarily in a competition with someone, in professional development, but I think I'm well aware of that. But at the same time, I think those has also come from my previous mentors and coaches that I worked with. They have also, been kind of, reinforcing their approach, that Nishad, you've got to continuously put into professional development. And just yet, and as an idea, if there's any, I always, since last, I don't know, probably last couple of years, I had a spark moment. I'm pretty sure that other people might have similar idea, but I'm investing into my kids' education through a scholarship group. So we put in every month money, so that when he goes to a tertiary education, university education, we get chunk of money back at that time, right? And I think there is a need right now for us, all the professionals, also to put some money aside every month, because to put in into our professional development, because the way the world and world of work is rapidly changing, I think we will need that kind of money to fuel that professional development, because ultimately that will boil down to whether do I have money to really gain that qualification, gain that certification, or undertake that micro credential courses or not. And those, I think that there's some, I don't know if there's any fund manager listen to that, because I think there's a great opportunity in that. But KB, please go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've had so much great advice, and we hope you guys have as well on this show about personal and professional development or career, and it's always personal to your experience as well. So for me, I always love it when I hear people talk about career happenstance and the curiosity and experimentation, because I think you don't know what you don't know until you start to do it. And you don't know what passion you should follow until you start to actually do some of those things. So I really love that idea. One thing I heard that really resonated with me, and I think it can really apply both in a business sense and in a career sense, is that idea that the extra mile is always the one that's got nobody on it. So what can you do that makes you absolutely known as outstanding in your field? What will give you that edge? What are you prepared to work harder at? Or what's the trickiest problem that you could solve in the work that you do that makes all of the other things within that within the realm of your role redundant. So, what's that one thing that you could absolutely focus on? And I really like that because it keeps you focused on stuff. And it's funny because just using a little example, but when I was looking to try and diversify what I was doing and set up the Straight to Shortlist Challenge, um, I picked something, and I did that as part of a training course, development course that I did, which was fantastic. It was developing a product and selling it to the market. And I could have picked, get your LinkedIn develop a product around LinkedIn or whatever, but I decided to pick something that nobody else was offering and have a promise that nobody else was prepared to make, which is, network your way to a job, get 5 meetings in 5 weeks, or get your money back. And that's that bit about the extra road. Like, that's a really tough problem in the market that people don't do, that and a big promise around it that positions you differently. It's harder for people to replicate. And I think you can apply that in your career as well. What could you do that would make everybody, that really solves a tough problem that a business is facing? And how do you execute on that? Because if you've got that, you've got an edge, you've got gold. So that really resonates for me. It's looking for that solution in the marketplace, basically. So yeah, so Johnny's saying thank you. Excellent. And Balin is saying, Nashad, in terms of money, we have to be financially intelligent. Interestingly, this topic is never discussed in home, excuse me, in school or college or the workplace. Well, I think I'll let you answer that, Nash.
But look, that's an opportunity for you, Mark, to think about doing something in those lines as well. It's a tricky topic to talk about because adults struggle with it. So if I'm struggling with it, it's difficult for me to explain that to my son or to my daughter. So I think there's some opportunity for you if you think that you can develop something around it. I think you'll go a long way. Around money education to kids or something. But that's just an idea for you to chew over the fat for on the weekend coming up. Okay, all right. So I think that's pretty much it, KB. I think we are running out of time and have answered all the questions. So thank you again, everyone. Balin, Imtia, Sajani, Priya, Ranjan Das, Poonam, to Amit, and if I missed anyone else, Gayan as well. So thank you again for tuning in on our 164th episode of Career Care Package. And we are going to, we got a question, explain the importance of LinkedIn profile. Glenn, I think that we'll probably cover that next week. How about we do that next week, Gayan? And if you want to reach out to me, I can send you a couple of YouTube videos that we have done on LinkedIn as well. That will kind of give you the basic understanding or a little bit advanced understanding of how you can leverage LinkedIn for finding a job in Australia. So thank you again, everyone. And we were anticipating that by 3:48 we would find out who won the election, but it is still in suspense. So we don't know that. So sorry to disappoint everyone
And
because
my
we could
cat's
not
hungry,
call.
so
Cat's hungry. My dog is waiting as well. Dad, once you finish, give me that treat. So, look, thank you again, everyone, joining. But let's talk about next week because we got some interesting guests coming next week
yeah.
as well, KB. So, we are talking about job seeking and confidence. It's a topic that I think everyone can relate to. When you're looking for work, it's tough for you to bounce back. It's tough for you to really get up and running every day. So we have invited one of my fellow student in the course that I'm doing, and she's going to come and talk about job seeking and confidence. She's a recruiter as well, so I think it's going to be fascinating to talk to Fung. And then on, we are also talking to Kate. That I think we could not get her last week. She has got a fascinating story of being a homeless teen to really starting up her business. That's an amazing story. And she's also one of my fellow student at the course that I'm currently doing. And then we are also talking to Gautam Mishra. He is the founder of a news broadcast app which is called Inkl, Inkl. And we are going to talk about the journey for him to leave the great job with Sydney Morning Herald, I think, and to starting up of something of his own, which is a brilliant, kind of startup thing. So that's what we are going to talk about next week. Until we see you next week, please stay happy, healthy, look after yourself, everyone, and have a great weekend. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.